I'm Gene Packwood with Anglican Renewal Ministries Canada. Welcome to King's Cottage. I'm here to introduce Mike Flynn, who's a retired Episcopal Anglican priest who lives in California, who traveled extensively with John Wimber and has led over 600 conferences on the Holy Spirit in his career. Today we're going to hear his story about how he was baptized in the Holy Spirit.
My story is that my mother gave me the book, A Man Called Peter, when I was 16. And I read that book and made the decision to be a pastor. But, I was so impressed with his lifestyle. So from that moment, I made a beeline towards ordination, which meant going to college, going to seminary, when I went to one in Sewanee, Tennessee, and then being ordained. And after 6 years in the ministry, I was planning my exit. It wasn't working very good. And the Lord had been getting after me through my mother's and my sister's prayers. My sister had been filled with the Holy Spirit about 5 years before all this. And she met with a group of people, and I just scoffed at them. I don't know who they are, but I don't want to meet them, But she was praying for me to be filled with the Holy Spirit. And God had to trick me into making this happen. Because he respects free will, you understand. He rarely goes against our free will, if ever. And so he tricked me into reading Dennis Bennett's book, at 9 o'clock in the morning. And what had happened is that a couple in my church went up to Washington, to Dennis's old church, you know about that. And their son kept trying to get them to go to church. They said, no, we've heard about this. We don't want to go to that place, And as they were backing out the driveway to come back to Southern California, he tossed that book in the window and said, please read this. And they said, okay. But they came to me and said, look, we don't want to read this thing. Would you read it and tell us how to answer our son? And I said, well, what's it about? And they said, oh, it's about people that speak in tongues and stuff like that. Well, I had no idea what he was talking about. But I didn't want to acknowledge that there was something in the church I wasn't knowledgeable about, So I said, yeah, I'll read that junk. And I took the book and they said, thank you. And they went away and I tossed it on my desk. The next day, the book was shining like light on my desk, and the thought came to my mind, you better read this book while you have time. And so I sat down and started reading. After about 2 hours of reading, I gave God a sliver of permission. I said to him, okay, if this is really you, go ahead and give it to me. And then I continued reading. A few minutes after that, I felt a sensation happening in my heart. It was a physical sensation that I was feeling that was going on. And I thought, what's this? And I kept reading faster to see if it would give me any idea of what this all was. And about 30 minutes after I had given him that permission, the Holy Spirit filled me and I overflowed and I felt like a volcano spewing light out of the top of my head. And all of a sudden I realized, holy cow, this stuff is real. My life has just changed. Big time. In fact, a couple of Sundays after that, I went to my early church, which is what all the older people would go to, at 7:30 in the morning. And during the announcements, I said, I have an important announcement to you. And they kind of looked up at me and I said, you have a new vicar. And they involuntarily cheered. And the fact of their cheer convinced me about what I had been doing to them. And over the next 7 years that I was still in that church, the same thing happened to most of them and their kids and even friends,
Like a volcano spewing light out of the top of his head. And the same thing happened to his parishioners and their friends and family as well. And that's our prayer at ARM Canada for all of you folk as well, that you would experience God's Holy Spirit in all his fullness and all the gifts and blessings and joy that come therefrom. I'm Gene Packwood for Wind and Fire and for Anglican Renewal Ministries Canada. Thanks for watching.